Gracias, Hervé. Antes de empezar, lo que vamos a hacer primero es presentarles un video que encontramos de la agencia esta de niños desaparecidos, Missing and Exploited Children, de Estados Unidos, y quedó muy ad hoc para esta presentación. Van a ser un poquito menos de 15 minutos, pero para que se vayan dando una idea de lo que hacemos. Gracias.
Every year, thousands of children find themselves caught in bitter custody disputes between their estranged parents. Many of these children will experience the turmoil, disruption, loss of trust, fear, and anger of suddenly finding themselves in a conflict of loyalty between their parents. Then, as so often happens, one parent begins the process of denigrating the other parent. They tell their children that the other parent is dead or no longer loves them. Sometimes children are whisked away to a distant place, or even a foreign country. Parental alienation is but another form of child abuse. Already traumatized by the loss of one parent, these children now find themselves caught in an impossible situation from which they may never recover. Gone forever is their feeling of trust and intimacy. Gone forever is their sense of security and balance. Gone forever is their childhood.
The way it has affected my relationships is it's made me very conscious that the people who love you or whom you love are very capable of hurting you. My name is Anthony Francis Wakefield, known as Tony Wakefield by everyone, and we're in Mexico City. I was actually born in Atlanta. My mother's Mexican from Chiapas, the southernmost part of Mexico country, and my father's American. He was raised in Atlanta. They met in Atlanta, and I was born and lived there until I was like 3 years old. At which point my father had this romantic idea of living in Latin America, and convinced or taught my mother into moving into Mexico. I thought it was like a hero to me. I really looked up to him. Growing up in Mexico, he was taller than most average men. He's a really, really tall man, robust. So I guess that enhanced the sense of he was like a super dad. He had a very successful job. He was also very tender, very loving and tender with me. The happiest period of my life was my childhood up until the time when I turned 10 years old. I think back of it as a very sunny. I think of sun. When my parents split up, it became a very dark place.
What happened to me, being abducted and all the negative messages I got about my mom, this was serious, serious, serious child abuse. The sheer mental torture that I went through as a kid, the fear, and now looking back and seeing that I was manipulated by my dad in the way that I was for his own interests. I mean, this is pure child abuse. My name is Cecilia, and we're in Oslo, Norway, which is the place that I was abducted from as a 4-year-old child. I was born in 1970 in Denmark to an American father and a Norwegian mother. And then when I was 3, my parents separated. My mother came back to Norway, which is where she was from. She settled in Oslo with me. She brought me to Denmark quite a few times to visit my dad or to drop me off there to stay for a few weeks with my father. He came here to Norway a lot and visited, and it was very open. He'd come for dinner or stay for a few days, or he'd come and pick me up, and we'd go on vacation for a week or 2 at a time together. So it was a very open kind of relationship. My mother wasn't trying to keep me from my father and wanted very much for me to have a good relationship with him. I loved him very much. I was very close to him and missed him very much, so she wanted to maintain that contact for me. I remember my parents fighting and wishing that they would stop. And they weren't even fighting, they weren't yelling or anything, but I could sense the tension and just wishing that it would stop and wishing that I could do something to make it stop.
Yeah, I don't think I wanted to be afraid of my father. I think that was a choice that was made by my mother, grandmother. My name's Thomas Ryan, I live in Edinburgh, Scotland. In May 1979, I was taken by my mother, my grandmother's husband, along with my younger brother, illegally from the state of Oregon to live in Scotland. That I was abducted by my mother for the purpose of preventing me ever seeing my father again. I was born in Eugene, Oregon, in America. That say the environment was middle-class suburban family. I had 2 older brothers and an older sister and a younger brother. My relationship with the rest of the family I would describe as what's considered a normal family relationship with brothers and sisters and mother and father. It was very much what I describe as the ideal of an average family. Before my mother and father were having relationship problems, a recollection of my father was someone I was happy to spend time with and did spend a lot of time with him in what I would describe as a normal relationship. I can't really remember that much, really, specifically, about that time, about just playing golf. I remember that, playing golf with him and caddying. I caddied for him. I became aware of some of the relationship difficulties between the mother and father from I was probably about 8 or 9. I remember them having arguments. The relationship difficulties between the mother and father were certainly inflamed by my grandmother's input. The result of that was a divorce, quite a confrontational divorce. During the divorce proceedings, my father had moved out of the family home. I was still living at the family home. My grandmother was spending a lot of time looking after us. My mother had been hospitalised. I seem to remember it being some sort of nervous problem. And during that time, I was looked after by my grandmother. This whole situation with my mother being in hospital and being ill was, the blame was put my father for this, that he'd caused this by his behaviour. And I no longer wanted to play golf. I can't remember if that was something my father still tried to encourage, but I was reluctant. It was something that was clearly associated with him, so it was something that was saying, why do you want to do that? And my father was being turned into a monster.